welcome to Reselling Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're on episode 418, an update episode.
That's right, 418 episodes in, and today is an update episode, and we love our update episodes. It's kind of the flagship episode of our podcast. It's the one I think I look forward to the most, other than the live episodes that we do on Mondays on YouTube. So the update episodes is where we get a chance to talk about what's going on in our life reselling wise, maybe give you some reselling stories while we've been out at garage sales and thrift stores, and then also talk about the breaking news in the reselling community, and give you those spicy bolos, those things you should be on the lookout for when you're at garage sales, thrift stores, on Facebook Marketplace, all the places you're doing your sourcing. So yeah, that's our update episodes here. And so Orlando, how are things going, man?
It's a mixed bag. You know, it's been good as far as, you know, eBay sales keep coming through, which I'm good. I'm happy about, and we're entering Q4, right? By the time this episode drops, we are officially in Q4, the very first couple of days of Q4. But it is interesting. And the reason I say it's interesting is just because sales have been kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, but I get big dollar sales, right? So I'll get a big dollar sale on a Monday and a Tuesday, and then the next day it'll be like $15 sales, right? And then the next day it'll be another like $15 sales, and which I really hate the fact that I have inventory that's worth that much. The only reason I have that is because at a certain point, I was able to sell things at a certain price, and then as the economy declined, you know, the cost of goods went down, and the cost of the market went down, and so I had to keep, you know, chipping away at the price. But it's interesting because, you know, it's funny. You know, people have commented how sometimes, like, you know, people get burnt out and they get tired of reselling, and I'm not there. I'm not tired of reselling. I'm just tired of like the eBay game, in the sense that, like, you can't, there's no prediction. Like, there's no way to be consistent. And I know there, again, people always say there's a lot of people out there that are killing, and I know there are, and I'm happy for them, and I want them to continue. But, you know, I'm going to keep listening. I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to stop. I know the sales are going to come through. I know there'll be consistent days again. But it's one of those where I love reselling aspects, right? So I love going out sourcing. I don't even mind the listing. I like the listing. I like researching. I like finding how much an item is worth. I like listing it. But I just don't like, you know, when I get to a place where I'm like consistently listing, consistently shipped out on time, I have 100% feedback, I'm top rated seller, and it hasn't changed. Like, nothing's changed. Like, it's still the same. So it's up and down. I mean, the sales, at least they keep happening. At least things haven't like died. The latest report on consumer confidence was actually one of the lowest ever. So if we're still selling on eBay, even despite the stats that are out there, we're actually doing pretty good. So I'm happy about that. It's kind of interesting. I went to a community garage sale, and I always tell people, like, don't sleep on mobile home parks. Like, a lot of people think, you know, they're missing out on mobile home parks, but there is so much out there. And the reason being, I've shared this on the podcast many times. Maybe I shared this even on the last episode. I can't remember. But the idea is that mobile home parks, yes, there are people that sometimes go mobile home parks because they can only afford so much and they can only make so much money. But a lot of people, too, are individuals that have retired. Maybe they had a big house and they had multiple kids, and all their kids are at college or they moved on with their lives. And they're like, you know what? We want to travel. We want to vacation more. We don't need a huge house, but we don't want to live in an apartment. We don't want to live in a condo. And they like moving to these mobile home parks because, you know, the one I went to this time, they had like a swimming pool. They had a pickleball court. They had like a golf course. Like, they had all this stuff, right? So, you know, it's kind of like a little resort, but it's a mobile home park. And I always tell people there's a lot of good stuff when you go to these. Not always guaranteed, but I do enjoy going to these because you never know what you'll come across. So it was one of those mornings where my first stop was automatically a win. So I picked up a bunch of service manuals for vintage vehicles. I paid, I think, like $40-$50. One of them is going to sell for $65. And so everything's going to be profit. But then I kept going from house to house to house. You ever had those moments where you're always one step behind another reseller? I don't know if that's happened to you, Mike, but that's what happened here. So I had one guy that like every time I would look at him, he's going to his trunk and putting stuff, and I'm trying to see what he got. Like, what do you have? Why do you? And he was like quick with it because he knows I'm a reseller, so he's kind of like putting his arms over his stuff. I don't know if he didn't want me to see. I don't know what was going on, but he's like quick with it and just shoving it. Looks at me, gets in his car, and takes off. And I know I missed out on a bunch of vintage toys because I went to one garage sale, and they had some Lionel trains, they had some old Marx toys, they had all this stuff, and there was like this big like opening where there would have been a bunch of inventory gone, right? So I was like, oh man, I missed out there. And so I went to another one, and you know, those discontinued Starbucks cups can go for a lot of money. And when I mean a lot of money, I'm talking about like $40-$50, but if you get them for like $1 or $2 a piece, like it's good money. So I go to this other house, there's multiple tables, and there's probably like 40 or 50 Starbucks cups, which would have been a crazy haul. I would have bought them all because they do sell well. And sure enough, as soon as I start looking, the lady next to me goes, hey, I already purchased these all. We're just trying to find a box for them. I'm like, is this what the morning's going to be? And I already started off the morning well. I was going to be able to profit, but I was hoping for more. Well, eventually, I arrive at a garage sale, and there's like all these Nightmare Before Christmas toys, right? And Nightmare Before Christmas, it's hit or miss, but usually there's a collector base. There's people that want certain items. And I was looking at the items, and I kind of said, hey, what are you thinking if I bought all of it? They're like, well, I don't know. I mean, this is like the last of ours. And I was like, oh. And they're like, oh, we had 3 storage units full, but Renee from Storage Wars already bought out all our stuff. And I was like, oh, man, he probably paid a good money for it. So I don't know what my wager's going to be. And I always tell people never give the first number, right? Mike and I have always done that. But sometimes you kind of just got to give the first number. So this one was a huge collection of items. And I looked at it, and I probably, reasonable would have been like $100, $200. But I thought, you know what? It's been a rough morning. I'm going to start super low and see if I can get lucky. So I go, what about $40? And she looks at me and goes, $40, like yells at me like $40. And I said, whoa. You told me to give you a number. You didn't give me a number. I'm just, let's make a deal. I'm not saying that $40 is something that I'm not going to be, I'm going to walk away with if you say no. I'm willing to hear from you. And then she goes like, well, what about, I was thinking like $100 to $200 for all this stuff. I said, well, I can do 100. And I was like, all right, you can do 100. And then she was asking me like, oh, so what do you do? And I'm like, I sell full time, but I also teach like homeschool kids, and I used to be, in education and all this stuff, and I'm looking to go back into education and all this stuff. And then she goes, you know what? I like you. What about 75? I was like, what? I'm like, okay. And so, I take out my money, and I only had 20s on me, so I gave her 80. I'm like, you know what? Let's make it 80. You were good to me. And this is rare for me. It's a rare occasion for me to give more than what somebody asked. I know it's only $5, but the reason being, it's always only just business to me. But she was very kind to me. Then she said, hey, by the way, we still have multiple boxes of stuff like this. And I was like, all right, well, here's my business card. And she said, when are you going to like start looking to kind of sell some more stuff. And I was like, Q4 is around the corner, and I want to sell some more. And she's like, oh, we'll be in touch. We'll figure it out. And I was like, wow. Like, I always tell people, be conversational. And there's a whole another part of the conversation I didn't include on the podcast, but we were just talking about living in San Diego. We even got into politics for a little bit. And I was, out front with my politics, and she was out front with her politics. And we just had a great conversation. And to me, that 1 or 2 or 5 minutes that I spent, right, was worth it to me, because these items that I picked up for $80, right, I paid $80. I'm probably going to sell for like 600 or more. So the reality is, when you're negotiating, remember, part of it is just being personable. And actually, I wasn't being personable just to make a deal. It happened after the fact, and it ended up working out. So that really made my Saturday, kind of made my week. eBay Open was happening, so I knew I was going to be a little bit busy with that. And also, I was traveling in the midst of eBay Open, so I didn't know how much listing I was going to get done, or sourcing at all. So this kind of set me up for the next 2 weeks of sourcing. I mean, I picked up, I don't know, I want to say 70, 80 items. It was a lot. It was a lot of stuff. So it was good. It was good. And it reminded me again why I like garage sales. After that, I had one more stop where I picked up like some Game Boy and Game Boy games. But, it's just one of those where I love reselling. I love going out there. I love hunting for stuff. I love finding it. I love making deals. And I love it when it sells, right? It's just all the in-between of having to deal with some of the eBay stuff, which we'll talk about eBay Open, that kind of I'm like, this I am tired of. So, but it was good. It's been a good week so far. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, sounds cool that you got that potential connection set up there, which is always one of those reasons why it's good to talk with people and be personable, because you never know what kind of connections you can make when you're at garage sales. So the weather here has been much nicer. We're definitely moving into garage sale season. This is now my going on my second year here in Texas. So I'm starting to kind of get the lay of the land. I'm starting to figure out when garage sales are happening, where the good places are. I tried to hit up a different neighborhood than I've kind of been going to, and it just wasn't as good. There were still garage sales, but it's kind of like, it's like fishing holes, right? Like you find the ponds that work where you're going to get the best bites. You kind of figure it out, and it's not a guaranteed, right? Like the grail item could be in the place you never go to because it has quote unquote the bad garage sales, and you could be missing, and you just never know. But I did pretty good. I picked up this must be a Nintendo weekend, because I picked up some GameCube controllers and some GameCube games at one garage sale, which I'll do pretty well on. They didn't have a GameCube, unfortunately, but the controllers do really well. None of the games were any of the ones that I'd be able to make crazy money on, but I'm still looking at making $15 to $25 profit on each. I picked up like 8 of them, and then also I kind of scored on this. So are you familiar? I'm sure you are, but the shoe brand On Clouds?
I do, yeah. Oh, yeah, those are good sellers too.
Did we sell On Clouds? I think maybe when we did that live.
Maybe a couple.
I think there might have been an On Cloud or two, but I wasn't really familiar with the brand. I haven't really seen many out in the wild, but my wife's been interested in them. She actually recently bought a pair for herself, and I was shocked at how expensive they are new, right? Like, it was my wife's birthday, so I had no problem getting her the shoes she wanted, but it's one of those things where some brands, they could just they charge crazy amounts. Like, you're looking at $200 plus for a new pair of shoes, which to me seems wild. Like, I get if you're a professional runner and you need like really good running shoes, but even then, like, a lot of times you can get good shoes for the $75 to $150 range. So that kind of gave me like a little bit of it piqued my interest, right? That this is a brand I really should be paying attention to. And lo and behold, I found a pair of almost new On Clouds. They were women's. They're On Cloud 5s, which is one of the ones that sells pretty well. And I couldn't figure out like why these were in such good shape. Like, I've been burned a few times with stuff that I think might be fake. Especially now with like Temu, you always have to be a little bit careful with stuff that's out there. So I actually had the conversation with them, like, oh, why are you selling these shoes? And it just so happened to be that they had purchased them. They didn't fit. And instead of going through the whole process of returning them, they had them in their closet for several weeks. And then they just decided, you know what, I'm just going to get rid of these. So they're selling them at the garage sale, which just goes to show. And I paid, I think, $45 for them, which I still think I'm going to be able to sell them for probably close to $90 because they're basically, like I said, basically brand new. But I still have to sell them as used. So I'm going to make $50 profit, maybe $60 profit on these. Which isn't a crazy deal, but for shoes, I mean, they're easy to take pictures of, they're easy to list, they're easy to ship, and it also goes to show that some people are just trying to get rid of stuff, right? Like, when you're at garage sales, a lot of times people give us a hard time for negotiating, and the reality is a lot of people are just trying to get rid of junk. They're just trying to get rid of stuff, and it might not even be junk, but to them it is. It's not worth it to them to return it or to have it sitting in their house. So a lot of times you're getting those good deals for those reasons. A couple of other things that kind of came up that I thought was interesting this week. I mentioned in a previous podcast, and I didn't go into a lot of depth. So one of my eBay stores, I do more like buying my personal stuff on, like my purchases, like if I want to buy something for the kids or for me. But I also have some items listed there. And I've noticed that when I buy on eBay, sales start coming into that store, even if I haven't been listing to that store.
Such conspiracy.
So I'm convinced, and I'm interested to hear in the comments below if anybody has had similar experiences. But to me, if that's true, if I can get a few more people to validate my claims here, that might be a reason to do eBay to eBay arbitrage, right? Because you might be able to trigger the algorithm in that way just by making those purchases, getting your items pushed up a little bit higher. And if you've got a good thing running where you're able to buy things on eBay and then just turn around and flip those same items on that eBay store that you bought them on, you could really keep that algorithm going because you're purchasing and listing. So you're kind of getting double bang for your buck for every item that you list there. So that's an interesting thing. And then another thing that I found, I guess I was bummed when I first moved here because we didn't have, even though we had an Amazon facility, we didn't have the same kind of Amazon delivery. Everything came USPS, so we didn't have, all of the people driving around with Amazon vans, dropping stuff off, which, a lot of times could get stuff to you sooner. But have you noticed there in San Diego, Orlando, are they doing Amazon same-day delivery now?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I get it by the afternoon, of course, yeah.
Yes, so I didn't notice that when I was there, so I don't know if that's relatively new, but the way it's set up on Amazon now, we have a warehouse not too far from us, is it's set up where if you buy, I think it's like $25 minimum of items that are eligible for the same-day delivery, and then you select a time slot, so it's like, we'll be delivered between 5 and 10, or we'll be delivered between this time and this time. So that's really neat. But it's also a little sketch because they're just rolling that out here in this area, which means they don't have Amazon professional drivers. They've got regular people riding routes. They got people who are, instead of doing Uber Eats, are doing Amazon deliveries. And I saw the other day, I was leaving H-E-B, which is like a grocery store out here in Texas. And as I'm leaving in the morning going to school, I see this big van, like a Sprinter van, open in the back and open on the side. And there's two people inside, and they kind of were wearing uniforms, but not like USPS uniforms. But there was like a big Gaylord box in the inside of it that had USPS written on it, and they were pulling out packages in the parking lot. And like this, they were at a part of the parking lot that didn't have anybody around, and they're literally just throwing packages out into like piles.
Okay.
And at first I'm like, what is happening here? But after I've been thinking about it with the Amazon delivery thing, is I'm assuming that this is just maybe a husband and wife or a team of some kind that have decided to start doing the same day delivery for Amazon. But I was just blown away by the way they were just chucking packages into piles and like just sorting them. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what are they throwing? That could be somebody's like breakable items.
That's why you always pack.
You've got to pack so well. So that was the first thing that went into my mind, is like, man, I really hope that, Amazon's pretty good with their packaging for the most part. Yeah. And if things arrive broken, they'll cover you on that. But you never know who's going to be delivering your stuff and how they decide to sort it. I've had really good luck with our local UPS and USPS drivers. They've been, pretty good. But I've also had some bad ones in the past. I had one that literally would just throw things towards the door and walk away. So you've got to really make sure you got your stuff packed. So when I saw that happen in the parking lot, I'm like, man, this is what happens when you hire not professionals, right? They're not professional delivery people. They're just average, everyday people who just rented a car or using their personal car. Somebody dropped off a same day delivery to me the other day, and they're just driving this like blue Honda Civic, and they're dropping packages off, which is a cool little side hustle.
Viral. You could have made it go viral and cost those people their livelihood. Yeah, that's what happens all the time on social media. You ever seen it where people, like even Dana White from UFC caught a FedEx guy just chucking items, and that guy got fired. So I'm just saying. What's up?
Yeah, I don't want to ruin anybody's lives, but I was a little shocked there.
But I gotta tell you, like it is. I always tell people, like, pack as if somebody's gonna throw stuff. Like, this is why I don't put fragile on my items. Right, because I need to pack it in a way that even if somebody chucks it across the room, like I'm still gonna be okay, right? Like I'll never forget when I had taxidermy, one of the most sensitive stuff you can ship, right? And all it takes is just like the box to go the wrong way, and like a wing breaks on a bird, or a beak breaks, or like, and it's terrible. It's not like you can repair that stuff really well, and so I've always like I remember when I packed it where like it would take somebody trying to like really like it would take somebody going to the top of a building and like just chucking it off the top of a building for it to break. But that's how I believe people need to pack, because you just never know. You just never. And I've heard individuals that do work in the post office tell me about back in the day, whenever it said fragile, people would not treat it as fragile. That would actually cause people to do more harm to it than good. So anyways, you got to be careful. How's everything else still going on? Sales and all that?
Yeah, I mean, pretty good. Pretty average for the amount of listings that I've been doing. So, yeah, I can't complain too much.
Okay. All right, hey, before we move on, before we get into our random stories, and I got some, I don't know if it's random. I'm just trying to hear what people have to say about this one. But check out my Reseller Genie. One of the things I'm looking forward to is I will be done with my taxes here pretty soon. And one of the reasons I'll be done with my taxes, I know, you're like, what? It's October. Well, I decided to delay my taxes because I got flooded, right? That the government said, hey, if you got flooded, you can do an extension till October 15th. And so I decided to do that. And one of the reasons being that my Reseller Genie runs in the background. I don't have to stress about anything. It imports everything from eBay and Poshmark, keeps track of my profit and losses, allows me to keep track of my inventory. It's just a great tool. And so if you haven't yet used my Reseller Genie, jump on over to our link below and use our code Pure Hustle, all caps. That's Pure Hustle, all caps, and you'll get 15% off the first month. Again, it's a great tool made by resellers for resellers. All right. Do you have any random stories?
Yeah, so I typically don't talk about the podcast very much. I try not to mix. I don't mind talking about reselling, but I try not to mix like that aspect of my life with my like real life, I guess you could say.
Do you find it weird? Like,
what do you mean?
Like, you know how there needs to be a stigma about reselling? Like, hey, if you talk to reselling, people's eyes glaze over and, people stop caring about what you're saying. I feel with the podcast, it's even worse.
No, I think people... I think
so?
people typically are really interested in podcasting.
Okay.
So I haven't found anybody respond negatively or kind of like be disengaged. I don't want to seem like, I'm like clout chasing. Like, hey, I've got the #1 reviewed reselling podcast on iTunes. That's me. I run that. You know what I mean? Like that's just like a weird thing to talk about in like a public setting. But a lot of times, so I was at a twice in one day. So I was talking to a coworker about something, and this coworker was doing a project with their students on a podcasting thing. So I was giving some input on it and trying to give some advice. And then so I just in passing mentioned, I have a podcast. And so we got to talking about that. And that was really cool to have that conversation. And then that same day, later on, I had training for another program. So I was at this training with a bunch of people from the district. It was like a big thing, a big training event. And they had us do the tell us an interesting fact about yourself.
Oh.
Well, I always struggle with that one. And it's like, well, I mean, honestly, the most interesting thing that I like about me is that I have this podcast, right? Like it's kind of a unique thing. So I just kind of mentioned it. And so a bunch of people were interested. And so I started talking to them about the podcast. And
did you get some new listeners?
Maybe there might be some people listening right now from my school. So that would be cool. But it was cool because while we're talking about this, a lot of people have reselling stories, right? Like they're talking about like, oh, I know a person who does that, or my nephew does that, or this person who used to work here does that. And so it allows like an opportunity to like connect on more than just a work level, which was really neat. But one thing came up, which I thought was interesting. So my wife is directing a homeschooling community this year. So there's a lot of families in this community, and she's in responsible for making sure like the facility is taken care of and that the supplies are there and all of those things. And so the kids are working on science stuff every week when they come in. There's a science project. And so she had to order a bunch of things for the kids to dissect. And there was like an owl pellet shortage that was like going around. So we had to buy our owl pellets on eBay. And then there was issues with like crawfish. And so I was like thinking to myself, like, there's a lot of people who are selling those types of things. That's interesting. And while I was sharing with these coworkers of mine and these people at the district that I resell, one of them told me that they had a friend who in their backyard, there was like a giant wasp nest that they were able to like take down. And then they decided to list it and sell it on eBay. And they sold it for like over $100. And I was like, a wasp nest? And so then I start looking them up, and sure enough, like you can sell wasp nests, especially if you're able to take them down in like a good condition, you know, they haven't fallen apart. Kind of like, you know, we've talked about taxidermy in the past, but I have a feeling some of these are used for decoration. In fact, some of the titles on these are like man cave, right? But also I'm sure that there's some schools and some people who want to be able to take them apart and do research. And so a lot of them are sold in lots of like 10 or 20 wasp nests that are a little bit smaller, more like a, you know, baseball sized wasp nest. And it just goes to show like you could really sell anything. And I don't think I'm destroying anybody's market, because if you've got the ability to go out and collect hundreds of wasp nests on a regular basis, there's not very many people who are doing that. You know what I mean? So you're probably safe if that's the market you're in. But it just goes to show, like, you know, maybe you live in a part of the country where there's owls, and, you know, on your spare time when you're hiking and you're just enjoying yourself, you find some owl pellets, throw them in a bucket or throw them in your backpack, and then after you get enough of them, list them on eBay. Like, there's people will buy pretty much anything for various reasons. And so it was interesting to hear that story and then to connect it to my wife's experience and us buying owl pellets online. I'm like, wow, people really do buy just sometimes the most bizarre things, and you always wonder why, but then it's like, oh, it makes sense. There's probably some school somewhere who's dissecting wasp nests, or somebody who wants them for decoration. So you never know what you can sell, and you won't learn those things or even think about them a lot of times unless you're willing to talk to people about reselling.
Yeah, no. And the thing is, again, I keep saying that, like, reselling is one of those that is not, I would say, we've said this before, it's not like, it's not something people look down upon, right? And I kind of got that experience. I went to an event. It was a huge, like, family event at a school, and just getting to know a lot of people, and people were asking what I did, and it was just interesting, because when it came to even reselling, and then and I told them I had a podcast, I always got oh yeah, I resell too. Like, I sell on Depop, or I sell on Etsy, or I sell on Poshmark, and pretty much, I would say, if I were to run numbers, I would say like 40% of the people I ran into did some kind of reselling. So it's definitely become mainstream. The hard thing about the podcast is I always feel like I have to go the extra mile to go, like, all right, I appreciate you want to listen to the podcast, but I want to let you know it's about reselling. It's not like Mike and I sharing our life experience. It's not about, like, it's about reselling, right? And so, I don't know. I know we got some listeners that listen to our podcast because they say, hey, we don't even resell and we love listening. So I appreciate you guys. Because to me, it's always surprising when people say that. But yeah, I'm glad you're willing to be brave and share that. So, my random story is just kind of, I don't know what's going on. This hasn't happened to me a long time, and I'll update you guys next time. But I actually got two things. I want to talk about another thing that I mentioned I was going to do last update podcast. So I had something that sold that was supposed to be shipped to Massachusetts. Now, when you buy something, right, when you print a label, right, it's going to print to the address it's supposed to go to, right? You're not going to get like a phantom address, right, that shows up. Am I wrong about that? I think I've sold thousands of items. Pretty sure that's the way it goes. So I ship out this item on a Thursday. This item I ship it out on a Tuesday. It ends up in New York by Thursday. And then it got kicked back to California and arrived in California on Friday. And then sometimes that happens and it tells you, oh, you know what? It doesn't say anything, but it's like, re-delivery or something. And like, it'll start sending it back to where it's supposed to go. No, this thing just went to Los Angeles and got delivered at a mailbox. And it's been delivered. And that's it. So now I'm going to have to call eBay, and I'll let you guys know. I probably should have done this first, but maybe we could do it on air, but we won't do it on air. But I want to know who was at fault here. Right? Does eBay expect me to file an insurance claim? But I can't file an insurance claim because the item arrived to a destination. Can I offer the guy a return? I can, but it's not. I don't think it's my place because it's not my fault. I just printed the label that eBay gave me, and the label should have said it arrived in Massachusetts, but instead it arrived in California. But then does eBay owe the return because it says that it's been delivered. So who's at fault here, Mike?
I don't know.
Okay. All right, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, I don't even know and I feel really bad because that's exactly, and like I looked at, you know how sometimes you do the switcheroo, right? Where you ship one item to one location that should go to the other location. But if that usually happens, you figure that out right away, because what ends up happening is the tracking is going to still show that the item that you printed the label for is going to arrive to where it's going to arrive. You end up finding out because the people message you back and say, hey, I got this item. I wasn't supposed to get this item. And then you're like, oh, shoot, that was supposed to go here, not here. That's not what happened here. There was no switch. So I don't know what happened. So stay tuned. We'll let you know what happens. The other item I had mentioned, a Cacique store. I hope I said that right. On Cacique store. I don't know if I said it right. On Instagram, I had suggested about ending items and then doing so similar, but 12 hours into the future, not right away. And I did it, and I had like a 50% success rate. So, the other thing is I got to do this over a long percentage of time. But you know what? Why I enjoy doing that? Because I felt like I was doing something. So, not saying it necessarily worked, but hey, if 50%, of that sell similar item, not that 50% of those items sold, but I would say for every 2 times that I did it, something sold from that sell similar. So to me, that is successful. We'll see what happens. Again, I don't know if there's any tricks, but that's kind of where we're at. All right, hey, let's jump into reseller topics. We got a lot to talk about here.
Let's do it.
We got eBay Open and some other events.
eBay Open, eBay AI bulk listing tool, and a baseball controversy. All this and more on Reseller News. Orlando, take it away.
All right. So eBay Open. Okay, now, I will say I'm excited about the 30th anniversary. Do you know it's going to be 30 years next year that eBay has been around?
Woo, yay. It's going into a midlife crisis now.
What? No, not 30-year-old midlife crisis? Is that when it's supposed to happen?
I mean, I don't know, man. Life is hard for some people,
think that's when
and
you
for some
settle down with
companies.
I think that's when you're supposed to be settled down and married with kids, I think. I think midlife is like 40s.
Well,
50s.
eBay. If that's the case, if eBay has kids, it's had a lot of prodigal children that have gone off and created other businesses that are taking market share from eBay.
Well, there you go. So, what I found fascinating was eBay Open. Like this one is going to be live. So the 30th anniversary is supposed to be somewhere. They're saying it's supposed to be in the fall. I really hope it's in the summer, because then that would mean more people would show. Not saying that eBay is consistent, that has all it has is teachers, but I would say it would make schedules a lot easier for people. Kids, if you have kids, they're not going to miss school. You can send them off to somebody's house. If you're a teacher, it helps you out. If you have eBay, it's kind of like the slow season supposedly. Right, so it's a lot easier. I don't know. I'm hoping that they'll do it in summer, but they actually are going to do a live event, so that's pretty exciting. So stay tuned for that. And that was the most excitement of eBay Open.
All right.
Okay,
so most exciting. So it was basically like a big commercial for the next eBay Open.
No, it wasn't even that. It was like I think it was on the second keynote that they brought it up. It wasn't like eBay 30th anniversary. It was interesting. What I would say is this: if you want to know what the keynotes were about, just listen to Purosa podcast over the last 3 months. Check out our reseller topics in the update episodes, and that's what the keynotes were. Every single item. So let me go through a laundry list. Well, the first one was they said create economic opportunity for all, whatever that means. Okay, maybe they do create opportunity. I kind of start reading that like maybe create an economic opportunity for all via the algorithm. But that's for another day. Now, they focused on enthusiastic buyers. Guess what they talked about last year? Enthusiastic buyers. Okay. They also, Jamie Ione, the CEO, said they are working on unpaid buyers. That was said last year, and that was said the year before. Now, to be fair, it's pretty much fixed, right? How often do you get an unpaid buyer?
Yeah, it's not as much now. Have you ever seen the show Flight of the Conchords?
I've heard of it. I've never watched it.
Okay, so I mean, you're an Office fan. You should watch it. It's got very, very dry humor. It's hilarious though. So the guy who's the voice of the crab in Moana, he's one of the guys on there. So it's like a singing duo. They're the Flight of the Conchords. It's a great show. Anyways, their manager at one point like calls them in to have like a band meeting, and while he's talking to them, he says, "Your fan base is said such and such," and they're like, "Fan base? We only have, you mean Mel? Like, we only have one fan." And he's like, "Yeah, but fan base sounds better than a fan." And that's kind of what I feel like eBay Open is, or eBay is with their enthusiastic buyer. Instead of like, it's like their spin on it. Instead of like, we're trying to grow our buyer base, it's like, our buyer base is shrinking, but it's a good buyer base that's small. So it's like they're trying to spin our fan base, our enthusiastic buyer, instead of saying like, well, we only have a small percentage of our buyers are really buying on eBay. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, no, it was strange because I'm looking at. Then they said, "Oh, we're also working on easy international shipping," and I was like, "What?" Like we talked about that like a year ago. Then they said improved AI background removal, huh? Like what? Like, hasn't that been a thing for like a year? I don't understand why this is being reintroduced. Then they said there was talk about like they're trying to delay the IRS threshold. You know how it was 600, but then even though the CEO wrote a whole article supporting the Inflation Reduction Act, which included that threshold talk in there of 600. And then he wrote a whole article backtracking saying, "I wish I didn't support it because this." So they're talking about that they're continuing to fight with Congress. I would just say maybe in the beginning you should have just been like, nope, this probably is not a good idea. But anyways, so then it was, hey, eBay Live, we're extending it to all fashion sellers. No, not all fashion sellers. We're extending it to apparel and fashion. And it's like, what? So who's gonna be able to sell live? I just want to know, because we've been talking about eBay Live for like 3 years, and the only people that are doing this are like celebrities. You know, Elton John had one recently. Ken Golden, who owns Golden Collectibles, who's awesome, gets to do these. Some of the top tier shoe sellers, but us, you know, little people, like we have no access. Like I remember, you know, I've mentioned this before. Craigslist Hunter, I think it's 2 years now ago, said he was so excited that eBay showed him how to do eBay Live. And I don't even know if Pete has been able to do eBay Live selling. Like, so I don't know. Let us know in the comments. Do you know anybody that is not a celebrity that does eBay Live? Okay. Now, I will say Ken the Hustlebee, props to him. Do you remember Ken from eBay Open 2019? I don't know if you remember Ken, but
I think so, yeah.
Really nice guy. And he actually was one of the co-hosts of eBay Open. So that was great to see him out there. So maybe he is now celebrity status and he's able to do eBay Live. So there was a QR code though. And if you went to that QR code, you could show that you're interested, and maybe that'll push you along to do eBay Open. That was good. And then the last thing that was on there, well, there's a lot of things. I'm just looking at the keynotes, was that they said that they're backtracking a little bit on their feedback removal, that maybe they were a little bit, they didn't say too harsh, but maybe they need to adjust some things when it comes to that. And then the last thing was in the keynotes, they had mentioned something about there will be greater penalties for bad buyers. So I was like, okay. So pretty much everything Mike and I have talked about for the last 2 years. Oh, bulk listing tool. And we'll talk about that here in our current events, not current events, in our reseller topics. That was the teacher in me there. But I don't know. I'm not going to ask you for thoughts, Mike, because I don't know if there is much thoughts left to interject here. But what are your thoughts, Mike?
Yeah. Cool, man. No thoughts.
I just feel really bad because I listened earnestly and I watched and I was like, all right, what are we getting here? Oh, let's, because I would love to talk about this in the podcast. And I'm like, what? No, what are we, why is the messaging the same messaging? I feel like I could have cloned the last two eBay Opens and just like did a word salad play, and then we would have had the same eBay Open. So It is. It is. I know Orlando's being negative. I just got to keep it real. Let us know in the comments. If you thought eBay Open was phenomenal, I want to know why. I want to know what am I missing? Like what was so good? Now, maybe you had great networking opportunities, but even then, in some of the places, you could tell that it was like very short-lived. Like it was really hard because it was kind of like there's somebody there and people are asking questions, and I was like, oh, okay. Like this is why I can't wait to be live. Where live you get the opportunities, right? It's kind of Mike, you've experienced as a teacher. You go to a teacher convention. Usually at a teacher convention, the keynotes aren't that great, the seminars aren't that great. But the connections that you make with other teachers or even the teachers that you work with, right, when you travel, right, that's what's memorable. That's what you can take back to work and you can apply, right? Yeah. I remember at last eBay Open, like the eBay parties that they had after, right, meeting people there, talking to people, hearing about their businesses. That's where I felt a lot of the value was.
Yeah, and because reselling is often such a solitary thing. I mean, we have listeners who work in teams or groups or have hired assistants or helpers, as the resellers like to say. But a lot of times it's just an individual living in their own little reselling world, and so breaking outside of that and networking with others, that is a crucial aspect because a lot of times you don't know what others know, and you don't know that they know that, you know what I mean, until you get there and you talk with them, and even just sharing those experiences. That's one of the reasons I love like our Discord. I love seeing people interacting in there and interacting with people, and just sharing like the general frustrations or having somebody that you can share your wins with, in the Discord, when somebody has a cool hustle or they find something or they find a new bolo and they share it with other people. And it's the thing that you couldn't normally just have water cooler talk. As much as I said earlier that people are interested in reselling, they're interested in the big stories, but the day-to-day reselling stuff, like they don't want to hear about, and then the shipping prices on this, and I was trying to figure out the best way to pack this, and I'm trying to find the right box, and that stuff isn't interesting to the average person. But if you're a reseller, it's like, oh yeah, well actually if you use this box and then you ship it, flat rate instead of and it's a fun conversation. They actually are engaged and they want to be a part of that. And so yeah, those opportunities are great. And so if you don't have a community, that's a way of helping build a community, is going to something like eBay Open, meeting with other people. But that's also one of the reasons why we have these online spaces, right? Is where you can interact in the comments. You can interact on our YouTube. You can interact on Instagram and Facebook and X and all those other places. Find some resellers, follow them, but nothing is better than like that back and forth that you get with actual one-on-one, face-to-face, or in something like a Discord, where you're getting that back and forth communication.
Yeah, so I hope a lot of people connected. I'll be honest with you. After a while, I just kind of shut things off and went back to it later. The first keynote was an hour and 42 minutes. That's a rough watch, especially no audience. Like, I just, I'm not going to talk about the past because people are always like, oh, you're talking about the past. But I'm telling you, like a live audience, people hyped up, people going, yeah, people clapping, like gets you hyped.
They brought in a marching band.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they did. It was like so good. I don't care. It was good. Okay. So having to watch somebody trying to be like Tim Cook, like it just wasn't doing it for me. I was just like, what is this? Like, what am I watching here? All right. Okay. All right, let's talk about one of the things they talked about, which is one of our reseller topics here. This is from CSA, chainstorage.com. They have an article about eBay's latest AI seller tool enables instant multiple listings. We kind of talked about this a little bit, but they talked about it at eBay Open. I thought I'd delve into it a little bit more. So eBay, they're continuing to use generative AI. And so what they're doing is that they're letting sellers upload batches of product images for which eBay will generate draft listings with suggested categories, titles, and items specific within seconds. And one part of the keynote or one of the workshops I saw, they also had said that it will also choose the shipping for you, which I thought was kind of interesting. After reviewing the details for accuracy, sellers can publish their listings to the marketplace. The magical bulk listing tool can process hundreds of photos per batch and create similar drafts simultaneously. US Seller Hub users can deploy the tool now to list in the sports trading card category, and eBay plans to expand it to more categories and countries in the coming months. So for me, this would be phenomenal. I would love this. Like you now, for now, it's just trading cards. But how incredible would it be if you come back from a garage sale, you take all your pictures. I personally use Photo Room. I'm still not a fan of eBay's background removal. I don't think it's as smooth as Photo Room. I'm willing to pay the $70 to have it for the year. By the way, Photo Room, if you want us to do an ad, let us know. But it is super clean. But it would be beautiful if I could take all those photos, if they're clothing, shoes, or whatever, and the AI could just take care of that. And I think that's where eBay wants to go. I don't know how long it's going to take because obviously some things would probably be harder than others, right? It says to handle shipping, returns, and payment, eBay will save and apply what a seller selected from their most recent listing in the same category. Sellers can update these settings on their listings at any time. And so basically the talk at eBay Open was they want to reduce the amount of clicks that every seller is doing when they're trying to put together an ad. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
I mean, we'll see where it goes. That's where I'm at on it.
All right. We'll see where it goes. Okay. All right. This next one, I like this story. There's actually two crazy stories. There's one. So there's this rapper Kendrick Lamar who dropped a song using an eBay photo image of some Nike Air Force Ones. It was all over the media. I'm not gonna read a news story on it, but this is where I know eBay is okay with you canceling sales, because the moment that those shoes appeared on like social media, that person's like was getting all kinds of eBay messages, and they already sold the shoes for like $70. So they canceled the sale and they relisted it at $45,000. And I'm like, wait a second. I was stressing about my lamp 2 years ago that I sold for $500. I could have just canceled it, and I think I would have been okay. I'm just saying. All right, this other story here. This is pretty wild. So did you see? Do you watch baseball?
No.
Okay, so Shohei Ohtani, probably one of the best baseball players of all time, may become one of the best baseball players of all time. He's at the Dodgers now. He broke the 50 for 50 record, 50 home runs, 50 stolen bases. I remember back in the 90s, I want to say was it the 40-40 club where it was like Jose Canseco? I'm going to look that up real quick. But this is a big deal. So people have been waiting for him to get to the 50-50 club, right? And whoever catches that baseball, right, it's going to be breaking a record, and it's going to go for a lot of money. The baseball is going to go for a lot of money. Now, the key person to go to, okay, for all of this, okay, is I believe is Ken Golden. Like, there's nobody in the game. Now, the beauty about having yourself go to Ken Golden, it is also connected to eBay because eBay bought Golden Collectibles last year. Well, the baseball was hit, okay, it reached over, and somebody got the ball. And the Dodgers offered him $300,000 for the ball. The guy said, nope, I'm not going to hand over the ball. Guess where it shows up? In the hands of Ken Golden. Okay? All right, so Golden Collectibles is now starting bids at $500,000. Okay, or if somebody wants to purchase it outright for $4.5 million.
Good grief.
It'd
be hard to turn down $300,000. Like, I feel like you got to really know that you're going to be able to do better.
Well, yeah, because the thing is, he's already passed. He might go, I don't think he's going to go 60-60, but he's gone past 50-50 already, right? So how much longer will the value? What about next year if he goes 60? I don't know if that's possible, but if he does go 60-60, that value of that ball is going to immensely drop.
I mean, maybe, but maybe not. I mean, it's still a record ball. Like, it's still is going to hold that value. But I mean, it will drop some, I'm sure, or it could go up, right? Like, I mean, think about, like, I don't know if you as we're recording this right now, I saw on Google News that I don't follow baseball, but I saw a thing saying that a famous baseball player, Pete Ross, passed away, right? So by the time this airs, that news is already out, and I'm sure people have already bought up everything they could on those, cards and baseballs and all the signed stuff, and are selling it and flipping it for way more now. So, I mean, those things, the values are going to go down, but then it could go back up, right, at some other point in the future. But either way, like $300,000, like that could buy a house outright, right? Like if somebody just said like, I can give this to you right now, but I mean, maybe you're not taking a huge bet because maybe you're confident that I could at least make that much on, you know, some kind of a sports auction site or on eBay. So, man, that's wild though. I think I'd have a hard time turning that down.
The story doesn't end there though. The story does not end there. Would you like to hear the rest of the story? It gets even crazier.
Let's hear it.
So, when you watch the video, okay, there's a guy, you know how there's always like this tussle, right? At the bottom, people are like clawing at each other. Have you ever been in I've been in that scenario where I've been trying to get a home run ball, and it literally is people are like, they're causing you physical pain trying to get that ball out of your hands. It's crazy. So I can only imagine for this one. Well, the original owner, now there's a lawsuit filed this past Wednesday. 18-year-old Max Mattis has claimed that he, in fact, is the rightful owner of the ball and is seeking a temporary injunction to prevent the concealing, absconding with, or selling of it. Mattis claims that he went to the Dodger versus Marlins game for his 18th birthday and caught the ball, according to the filing. However, a few seconds later, the filing claims Chris Belansky, one of the three named defendants in the lawsuit, as well as Golden and Kevin Ramirez, trapped Mattis's arms in between his legs and wrangled the 50-50 ball out of Max's left hand. The filing adds, in doing so, Belansky wrongfully and forcefully obtained control of the ball and was escorted out of the stands by security with the 50-50 ball plaintiff had possessed now in Belansky's wrongful possession. The lawsuit includes screenshots from what it claims is video evidence from the multiple fans of Belansky ripping the ball from Mattis's grasp before lifting the ball. Whew. So who knows what's going to happen? I've seen the video, and I know some of you that are listening have watched it. The video cuts to when both of them have it. So I don't know who grabbed it first or what happened. But yeah, it is. I don't know. It's just kind of cool. This happened before. There was one where Barry Bonds, by the way, was 40-40 Club. Barry Bonds had a record-breaking 73rd home run in 2001. Alex Popov was the first to get a glove on the ball after it sailed into the stands, but he later claimed in a lawsuit that it was torn from his hand by Patrick Hayashi, who emerged from a scrum of fans. Is scrum a word? Scrum?
Yeah, it's like I mean, I don't know if it originates from rugby, but in rugby when they do they throw the ball in and all the guys are pushed together in like a big ball and they're forcing each other against. That's a scrum. Okay,
scrum of fans with the ball. You also learn new vocab on this podcast. Scrum of fans with the ball in hand. Hayashi said he found the ball rolling free in the minute-long melee. What? It was just rolling. So this was the judge in December 2002. A San Francisco judge ordered the two men to sell the ball and split the proceeds. The ball was eventually sold to comic book creator and producer Todd McFarlane for $450,000. So we'll see what happens here. The thing with the Ken Golden auction, you don't know how high that's going to go. Right? If they're saying, hey, we'll sell it outright for $4.5 million, does that mean that it could reach more than $4.5 million? Don't know.
No.
We'll see what happens.
It wouldn't reach more than that if they're going to sell it for that much. But it could.
No,
reach
but they're
that.
willing to sell it outright, like before the auction. Like that's the buy it now price.
Yeah, but if that, well, I mean, if somebody's willing to pay more than $4.5 million, they're just going to buy it outright right now. So that's where they're looking at is most likely the upper end.
True, because that's why no one's bought it, because maybe they'll bid it, hoping that the bid.
They're hoping to get it less than that. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see. But again, this is the era. This is great for eBay. It's great. Great news for eBay. Great news for Ken Golden. And I got to tell you that show is motivating to me. The whole auction house. So, anyways, that is our reseller topics for you guys. Hey, before we move on to the last two sections of our show, want to invite everyone to help support us on Patreon. Doing the podcast does take some time, putting together the information, editing the videos, and just getting everything ready. And, we could be reselling, we could be spending time with family, but we are able to do this because all of you that support us on Patreon. So go to patreon.com/PureSoulPodcast for $5.55 a month. I think we are the cheapest Discord in reselling that exists outside of free. And you will get a plethora of resellers, of information, bolos, hustle of the week, a place to vent, a place to find comfort. You can find it in our Discord. So in order to get on our Discord, go to Patreon and help support us for $5.55 a month. Also, we are on all social media. We are PRSO Podcast. We are PRSO Cast on X. You can always give us a call at 619-738-1170 at 619-738-1170, or shoot us an email at puresopodcast@gmail.com. Also, feel free to jump on over to the YouTube. If you're listening to us on iTunes, hit that subscribe, smash that like button, hit that bell notification. And if you really enjoy the podcast, I invite you to come on over to iTunes, write us a 5-star review, tell us why you enjoy the podcast. Helps us in the algorithm and helps bring more listeners to hear about Pure Hustle Podcast.
Yeah.
All right, Mike, what's some bolos here?
So my bolo is home improvement items. So people are constantly having to fix things in their houses or replace things in their houses, and prices continue to go up. Going into Home Depot today costs way more than it used to. It's kind of shocking sometimes to, especially if you've got to buy lumber or something like that. But if you can, it's amazing how often I find at garage sales things like still in package smoke detectors or thermostats or faucets or various things like that. You can do really well on those because those are things people need, right? People are buying those things and they're willing to, if they can get them cheaper, on eBay, they're going to do it because, if you're replacing a bunch of smoke detectors in your house and you can have to go to Home Depot and buy them brand new versus the one, especially the thing to think about with these is if let's say you've got an apartment complex that you manage and there's smoke detectors in all of the units and one of them goes out and you have to replace it. Well, you're probably going to want to have the same one that's in all the other ones for consistency and various reasons. So people are going to buy ones that are maybe a couple years old models or even older because they know that this one works. It works with our system. So you can do really well on those types of items. What about you?
Now, I feel like we need to throw a warning that smoke detectors and like carbon monoxide detectors, make sure you have reseller insurance if you sell those items, because those are items you could be liable for. Like if things don't work. So just be aware of that. And Amazon will not back you. So just giving you a heads up. But yeah, definitely home improvement stuff is good. So I've mentioned this many times before, but I want to mention it again because we are about to get into the throes of Q4, and that is discontinued Q4 toys. So take a look at items that were hot last year, maybe even hot 2 years ago, maybe even hot 3 years ago, because they sell for good money. One of the items I had already sold was a bunch of Batman toys that were pretty hot 3 years ago, no longer being sold anywhere. And guess what? I'm able to sell them for 40%, 50%, sometimes 100 to 200% more of what they were worth before. So keep an eye on that. There's all kinds of stuff out there. I haven't looked at Hatchimals, but what I'm saying is if there's anything that is discontinued that you have not seen for a while, that people are like, yeah, you know what? I really would want that. Like, it may be worth it. I don't know if Hatchimals is one of those. I'm looking up right now. Yeah, fingerlings is still not there. Don't go out crazy with the fingerlings. This fingerling is still worth. It's actually worth the same. I'm pointing. If you're listening to the podcast, I'm pointing the one on my shelf. It's worth the same it was when you could buy it at Target and Walmart back when they first became popular. So they haven't gone up in value, but certain Legos that are discontinued are very hot in Q4, and some other toys that were hot items during that time, I definitely would keep an eye out for. All right, Mike, what are you looking forward to here?
I am just looking forward to more garage sales. Now that the weather is looking nicer, I'm excited about that and hoping to get out there and really crush them deals and hopefully find one of those. I'm ready to have a hustle of the week myself, like one that's legitimate, like, man, this was the score of the year. So hopefully one of those comes soon. What about you, Orlando?
So I've said this many times, but I am finally coming to a place where I am wrapping up my taxes and I will feel so free. Unless I owe a lot of money, then I will feel like I'm in bondage to the U.S. government. But I don't think that's going to be the case because things were so bad last year. But I'm grateful to be done with that. I'm grateful that I have my reseller genie that makes it easy. I'm also looking forward to listing a lot of the items I picked up over the last few weeks. I've been traveling a lot recently. I haven't shared too much on the podcast. That's why there hasn't been much on social media, just because I've been doing a lot of traveling. And so now I'm back home for an extended period of time. And, I have a lot of good things that I know can sell for good money. I already sold some of that Nightmare Before Christmas stuff. like the next day. Like I wouldn't even say next day, like within hours. So I'm already making my profit on that. So I have some other items. I have those old car manuals. I have like 3 or 4 buckets full of homeschool materials, and I've sold some of those. That's a bolo too. So I'm kind of looking forward to just, seeing if I could clear that out so I can make room for more inventory to be able to sell and continue being profitable.
I like it.
All right, everyone, thank you for joining us on the podcast. And as always, if you haven't yet hit that like button, appreciate every single one of you. It is Q4. So, make sure to be out there, be sourcing, be listening, knowing that good times hopefully are around the corner. With that being said, make sure to be real,
Be relevant.
and be reselling.
Peace.